Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Daf from Chullin and on Daf 32 to Omid A. But if another animal is inadvertently stored together with the red heifer, Nishkacha Chata Behema Achavis Imo, if one slaughtered a red heifer and another animal was inadvertently slaughtered simultaneously, or gored inadvertently caught simultaneously, the red heifer is valid and has been intended only to slaughter the heifer. In addition, the slaughter of the other animals is also valid because the slaughter of non-sacred animals does not require intent. Now, ostensibly, this ruling is contrary to the opinion of Rava, as the Rambam rules in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nathan. Apparently, the Rambam had a very reading of the text, both are valid, the Kesef Mishnah. If one intended to cut a gourd and cut it while performing the slaughter, the red heifer is disqualified because the person performed labour while slaughtering the heifer. And that's in the Rambam Sefer Tahara, Paraduma 4:18 and Sefer Kedusha Shechita 2:11. In the same action, according to Rabbi Nathan, who holds that the slaughter of non-sacred animals without intent is valid, the red heifer is disqualified. The Rabbi Nathan Par Pasula. Rashi writes that the reason a red heifer is disqualified when an additional act of labor is performed at the time of the slaughter is that the person diverted his attention from the heifer. In this case, that does not apply, as intended to slaughter the heifer. Nevertheless, the slaughter is not valid. As explained in the Gemara, Beinu Gershom Mohagola explains that since slaughter without intent is valid, it is as though the person performed labor while slaughtering the heifer, and this disqualifies it. According to this estimate, the disqualification of the red heifer as a result of the performance of labor is not due to lack of intent, rather due to the performance of labor itself. This is the halacha only if it is an actual act of labor, not another type of action. This is also the opinion of the Rambam, Sefer Tahara Hilchot Paraduma 7:4, though the Rava disagrees. Because an additional labor was performed with the slaughter, and the other animal is fit for consumption, and the slaughter is valid. According to the rabbis who hold that the slaughter of non-sacred animals without intent is not considered slaughter, therefore it's fit for use in the purification rite because no other labor was performed with its slaughter, and the other animal is unfit for consumption. The Gemara asks, that is obvious. Why do I have to teach that? The Gemara answers, it was necessary for Rava to teach halacha according to the opinion of Rabbi Nathan in a case where another animal is inadvertently slaughtered in the same action with the red heifer. It may enter your mind to say the most one states with regard to the slaughter of that heifer, you shall give it to Elazar the priest, and he shall slaughter before him in Numbers 19:3, from which it is inferred. One may slaughter it, but not it and another animal simultaneously. One of the circumstances of that prohibition, it is the case where one slaughtered two heifers at the same time. In the case where one slaughtered a red heifer with a non-sacred animal, say no, it does not disqualify the red heifer. Therefore, Rava teaches us that even slaughter with a non-sacred animal disqualifies the red heifer. Rava adds, and one slaughtered a red heifer and in the same action cut a gourd together with it, everyone agrees that the red heifer is disqualified. If one slaughtered a red heifer and a gourd with inadvertently cut together with it in the same action, everyone agrees that the heifer is fit for use in the purification rite, as it is not. Sorry. And that is not labor that disqualifies the red heifer, and it is also not excluded by the derivation from the verse, and he shall slaughter it. If one was in the middle of slaughtering the animal, the knife fell and lifted it, and then completed the slaughter, or if his garments fell and he lifted them, and then completed the slaughter, or if he honed the knife and grew weary, the Rambam explains that the person was drawing a knife back and forth across the neck of the animal when he grew weary and was able to complete the slaughter. Although the Gemara says, when another came and slaughtered the animal, the same halacha applies even to the person who completes the slaughter himself. The Gemara cites the case that involves another because typically, when one grows weary, another person completes the slaughter of the mission before completing the slaughter, and another came to slaughter the animal. We interrupted the slaughter in one of these ways, or in a different way for an interval equivalent to the duration of the act of slaughter. What is the type of interruption that invalidates the slaughter? It is, for example, in the case where one begins the slaughter and interrupts his action before the slaughter is complete, whether he did so intentionally or unwittingly, under duress or of his own volition, and either he or another person completes slaughter, what is the duration of the interruption that invalidates slaughter? For a small animal, it is equivalent to the period necessary to lift a small animal from the ground, lay back on the ground and slaughter. For a large animal, it is equivalent to the period necessary to lift a large animal from the ground, lay it back on the ground and slaughter it. For a bird, it is equivalent to a period necessary to lift a small animal from the ground, lay it back on the ground and slaughter it, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Hanina. And let's say that for a bird, the duration of this interruption is the amount of time necessary to cut 1/7 of a bird, while lifting or laying it back on the ground, and that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Hanina holds in accordance with the opinion of Rav. The custom is to invalidate slaughter due to any cause at all for both a bird and an animal. That's in the Rav Sefer Kedusha Chachchita 3 Shulchan Aruch Yardei 23:2, and in the comment of Ramah. The slaughter is not valid. Rabbi Shimon says the slaughter is not valid if he interrupted the slaughter of an interval equivalent to the duration of an examination. The Gemara asked, what is the meaning of an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter? Rav says it means an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter of another animal, not the duration required to complete the act of slaughter that was interrupted. Rav Kahana, Rav Asi said to Rav, is the interruption that invalidates the slaughter. Excuse me. Where was I? It is the interruption that invalidates the slaughter, and is the interruption that invalidates slaughter an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter of another animal for an animal? I.e., in a case where an animal is being slaughtered, an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter of another bird for a bird, or perhaps it's an interval duration of an act of slaughter of an animal even for a bird. If the interruption is any shorter, it does not invalidate the slaughter. I've said to them, when we studied this topic, I did not feel sufficiently intimate with my beloved uncle Rabbi Chia, such that I could ask him that question. Rav was only able to transmit that which he heard from Rabbi Chia, and unable to resolve their dilemma. It was stated that there was an Amorite dispute with regard to this matter. I've said an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter for another animal for an animal, and an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter of another bird for a bird. And Shmuel said an interval equivalent to the duration of an act of slaughter of an animal even for a bird. And likewise in Ravin, so a little bit on Ravin here. Ravin, this refers to Rabbi Avin, a third generation Amor from Eretz Yisrael. Ravin was one of the youngest students of Rabbi Yochanan. Ravin was studying with Rabbi Yochanan, more prominent students, Rabbi Abahu, Rabbi Zayim, Rabbi Eli. Apparently he was a merchant by trade and served as an emissary to transmit the Torah of Eretz Yisrael to the Babylonian sages. Rabbi Avin was considered a prominent student and a perfectionist who transmitted the Torah primarily as it was taught by Rabbi Yochanan with great precision. His arrival is often mentioned after the arrival of Rav Dimi, and halacha generally ruled in accordance with Ravin's opinion. Although the Babylonian sages respected the Torah that he transmitted, they did not consider him a particularly great scholar. Nevertheless, his statements appear frequently in both the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud, where he is called Rabbi Bon. Apparently, Ravin returned to visit his teachers in Eretz Yisrael and sent messages possibly by a letter back to Babylonia, containing traditions he learned from them. See Ketubah 49b and Bab Metzia 114a. Another Rabbi Avin appears in the Talmud. He was the son of the first Rabbi Avin, and his father died prior to his birth. Came from Eretz Yisrael, Babylonia. He said that Rabbi Yochanan said an interval to the duration of an act of slaughter of an animal even for a bird. Rabbi Hanania said an interval equivalent to the period in which one can bring an animal slaughter. The Gemara asks, does this mean that the time in which one can bring an animal even from anywhere else, also the distance? Occasionally there is no animal available in close proximity, If so, you have rendered your statement subject to circumstances. What does this mean? This expression appears to Torah as a rationale for rejecting a halacha that does not include fixed parameters. Although in certain cases it is possible that due to the rationale for a specific halacha there is room for leniency or stringency, the concern remains that if the standards are subject to change, the authority of the halachic determination will be undermined. Therefore, as far as possible, halacha are established with fixed parameters without reference to specific circumstances. It does not apply uniformly in all cases. Rav Papa said, the practical difference between the opinion of Rabbi Hanania and that of the other sages is in a case where there is an animal standing before slaughter, it is necessary to cast it to the ground in order to slaughter it. Rabbi Hanania disregards the time required to bring the animal from elsewhere, but Rabbi Hanania holds that the slaughter is invalidated only if the interruption lasts an interval equivalent to the duration of the act of casting the animal down to the ground and slaughtering it. The rabbis invalidate slaughter even if an interval has elapsed that is equivalent to the duration of the act of slaughtering the animal without casting it to the ground. The Gemara cites an additional opinion with regard to the duration of the interruption that validates slaughter. They said in the West, Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, the duration of the interruption that invalidates slaughter is equivalent to the period in which he can lift the animal from the ground and then lay it back on the ground and slaughter it. The interval is calculated based on the size of the animal in question. The duration of the interruption that invalidates the slaughter of a small animal is equivalent to the period necessary to lift, lay down, and slaughter a small animal. The duration of the interruption that invalidates the slaughter of a large animal is equivalent to the period necessary to lift, lay down, and slaughter a large animal. Behema daka, behema gasa. Large domesticated animals are those raised for labor as well as food. These include kosher animals such as cattle, and non-kosher animals, horses, camels, and donkeys. By contrast, the category of small domesticated animals include kosher animals such as goats, sheep, and non-kosher animals such as pigs. However said, in the case of one who slaughters with a blunt knife, one may slaughter using a knife with a blunt, smooth blade that has no notch. Even if the slaughter lasts a full day of drawing the knife back and forth, his slaughter is valid in accordance with the Baba. Nevertheless, the Sheikh writes that one may not slaughter with a blunt knife on the issue because any interruption in the course of the slaughter renders the slaughter not valid. That's in Ramban Sefer Kedush, Hilchos Shechita 117, Shulchan 18:7. Even if the completion of the slaughter lasts the entire day, the slaughter is valid provided there is no interruption in the midst of the slaughter. Rabbi raises the dilemma. If there were several short interruptions during a single act of slaughter, what is the halacha in terms of whether they join together to invalidate the slaughter if the sum of the durations of all interruptions is greater than the maximum permitted interruption? The Gemara challenges, and let Rava resolve the dilemma from his own statement, as he permitted the act of slaughter that lasts the entire day, during which there was presumably brief interruptions throughout. Apparently the interruptions do not join together. The Gemara responds, there Rav was referring to a case where there was no interruption, as the slaughter drew the knife back and forth throughout. Rav Huna, son of Natan, raises a dilemma. If one cut the majority of the simonim and then interrupted the slaughter before proceeding to cut the minority of the simonim, so what does this mean? Shehabamiut simonim. If one slaughters a blunt knife, and the time it takes to slaughter the minority of the first simon is the duration of an interruption that invalidates the slaughter is not valid because the dilemma of Rav Huna and Rav Natan remains unresolved. In accordance with the explanation of Rabbi Shaya Halevi cited in Torah with 30 people, if one interrupted the slaughter after cutting the majority of one simon in a bird or the majority of both simonim in an animal, and then complete the slaughter is valid in accordance with the ruling of the Tosefta. Others say that any interruption before the completion of the entire slaughter invalidates the slaughter, in accordance with Rashi's explanation of the dilemma of Rav Huna, son of Rav Natan, and ruling in accordance with the student side of his dilemma. The custom is to invalidate the slaughter due to any pause at all. I'm saying for Kedush, Hilchos Shechita 34, Shulchan 23:4-6. What is the halacha? The inner commentators find this dilemma and the dilemma raised by Rav Papa with regard to concealing the life. It would be difficult primarily because it's a set and the Gemara in 29a providing explicit rulings in these matters. Rashi explains that this dilemma concerns a case where one interrupted the slaughter only after having cut the majority of the simonim. Although the slaughter would be valid were he to stop at that point, the fact that he continued raises the dilemma of whether or not interruption at that stage involves slaughter. Rashi adds, and since the ruling is stringent, one who cuts the majority of the simonim and interrupts the slaughter may not continue the slaughter. Rabbeinu Doshem Mohagol and Rabbeinu Tam explain, and this then refers to a case where the interruption occurred after one cut the minority of the simonim. Accordingly, the dilemma is whether it is considered as though it began the slaughter, and the interruption at that point will invalidate the slaughter, or whether interruption invalidates the slaughter only when it takes place after you cut the majority of the simonim. Others explain that the dilemma is with regard to the length of the slaughter. Does the phrase "an interval according to the duration of the act of slaughter" mean the duration of cutting both simonim completely, and of cutting the majority rather than the meiri? Alternatively, the dilemma is, does it mean the duration of cutting the majority of both simonim or the duration of cutting the minorities in the Rambam? Many commentaries support the explanation of Rabbi Shai Halevi citing Tosfot 30b. The dilemma is not with regard to pausing in the middle of the act of slaughter, rather it is just about statement in the case of one who slaughtered with a blunt knife. Even if the completion of the slaughter lasts the entire day, the slaughter is valid provided no interruption in the midst of the slaughter. The dilemma is, if you cut the majority of one simon, and cutting the minority of that simon before beginning to cut the second simon, consider interruption because it is unnecessary, or perhaps the entire slaughter considered one act, and cutting the minority of the simon is not an interruption. The Rashba Ba'amor, Sefer Makir 5. The Gemara answers, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. The Mishnah teaches, or Mishnah says, the slaughter is not valid if he interrupted the slaughter for an interval according to the duration of an examination. The Gemara asks, what is an interval according to the duration of an examination? Rabbi Yochanan said, it is an equivalent. This is an interval according to the duration of an examination of the knife by the sage prior to the slaughter of the animal. The Gemara objects, if so, you have rendered your statement subject to circumstances, and sometimes the sage is near, and sometimes the sage is far, and the time required for examination varies accordingly. The Gemara responds, well, the reference is to an interval to the duration of an examination performed by the slaughter who is a sage. In that case, travel time is not factored in. Only the time of the examination itself is considered, and this does not vary. If one cut the gullet in the standard manner of slaughter with a back and forth movement, and he severed the windpipe, Shachrat es ha-ved-shed v'fasak es ha-gemes. She explains that the phrase sever the windpipe means that one ripped the simon and thereby invalidated the slaughter. Since the Gemara 9a states that all the acts invalidate the slaughter are listed in the Mishnah, and ripping is not mentioned in any other Mishnah, it is logical that this case is referring to ripping. Ripping refers to a case where, in the course of slaughtering the animal, one rips the windpipe from its place, but it is ripped from its place due to a notch in the knife. That's what on 9a. Other early commentators interpret ripping as cutting of a simon as it was displayed. By contrast, the reference here to severing the windpipe in a manner other than through slaughter of Rabbeinu Yonatan, Lunel, and the Meiri, not in the standard manner, or if one severed the windpipe and thereafter cut the gullet, or if one cut one of the simonim and waited until the animal died, or if one cut one simon and concealed it beneath the second simon and severed it. The term severed it means that he did not cut the simon in the prescribed manner. Now he cut the second simon in an upward motion rather than in a downward motion of the third to the nape. There's a qualification here due to the fact that he concealed the knife after inserting it and then cut the simon. As explained in the Gemara earlier, did he be even if he conceals the knife between the two simonim and cuts the second simon in a downward motion and then extracts the knife and cuts the first simon? Here the Mishnah introduces a novel element. Even if he cut the first simon in the prescribed manner, and if he then conceals the knife between the second simon, the slaughter is not valid due to the fact that he concealed the knife. Furthermore, this happens frequently in the course of slaughter, After he draws the knife, what causes the first simon? When he draws the knife back, it is inserted beneath the second simon, Tosfos 30b. And below, Rabbi Yeshevav. Rabbi Yeshevav was one of the sages of Yavna during Rabbi Gamliel's reign as Nasi. Is mentioned together with the sage of the generation who sat and studied before Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Not many statements are attributed to him in the Talmud. There was an Alman Sham dispute with Rabbi Akiva, whom he called Akiva ben Yosef. Both of them studied before Rabbi Yeshua. Not much is known about his life, though it is related that he distributed all his belongings to the poor. In fact, Rabbi Akiva chastised him for donating too much to charity. It was likely that he is Rabbi Yeshev the scribe, who was one of the 10 martyrs executed by the Romans during the Bar Kokhba rebellion. In addition, the 90-year-old sage told his disciples to support each other and uphold justice and peace. Midrash Ezekah. He was then thrown to the dogs and was not buried. The name Yeshevav appears in the book of Chronicles, of 1 Chronicles 24:13, as the name of one of the priestly watches. This watch received mention in several places in the Talmud and has been praiseworthy during the Second Temple period. The animal is an unslaughtered carcass. An unslaughtered carcass refers to any animal that dies on its own. It is prohibited to eat an unslaughtered carcass, as is the primary source of its impurity. By contrast, a treifa is an animal with an illness or wound that will cause its death in the near future. Although the Torah prohibits eating meat of a treifa even after the slaughter is effective in preventing the animal from assuming the status of an unslaughtered carcass. If slaughtered, treifa does not submit impurity. It imparts its impurity to contact with it and carrying it. Rabbi Akiva says the animal is a treifa. Rabbi Akiva on treifa. Most of the commentators understand that before he conceded accept the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva did not disagree with the basic premise that an animal that died in any manner other than through slaughter is an unslaughtered carcass. Rather, he held that even an act of slaughter that is not valid is effective in preventing the animal from assuming the status of an unslaughtered carcass and from validity of purity. It's agreed only in a case where the slaughter was invalidated because one concealed the knife, but in other cases he agreed that the animal assumed the status of an unslaughtered carcass because the simonim were not cut in the prescribed manner by Yonatan of Danel, being Muki Yosef. Others explain that Rabbi Akiva initially held that the slaughter is effective specifically in a case where one cut one of the simonim, as such slaughter is effective for a bird. If both simonim were cut in a manner that involved the slaughter, e.g. with the knife concealed, Rabbi Akiva conceded that the slaughter is completely ineffective and the animal assumed the state of an unslaughtered carcass into a hash. In the Toseftim 5.2, it is stated explicitly, and even in that case, Rabbi Akiva holds that the animal does not assume the state of an unslaughtered carcass. From there, it appears that Rabbi Akiva holds that any animal that one slaughters, even if the slaughter is not valid, can no longer assume the state of an unslaughtered carcass. In Moshe 2:27. And although eating it is prohibited, it does not transmit ritual impurity. Rabbi Yeshua says the principal name of Rabbi Yeshua. Any animal that is rendered unfit during its slaughter because the slaughter was not performed properly is an unslaughtered carcass. Only valid slaughter prevents an animal from assuming the status of an unslaughtered carcass. If the slaughter is not valid, the animal assumes that status and becomes a primary source of impurity and transmits impurity to carrying. This ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshevav, because ultimately Rabbi Akiva concedes his opinion. If there is any uncertainty as to whether or not slaughter is valid, the animal assumes the state of an unslaughtered carcass. If one eats its meat, he is slugged for rebelliousness. Rambam Sefer Kedush Chachit 3:18 Sefer Tahara Afatumat 1:2. Any animal whose slaughter was performed properly and another matter caused it to become unfit is a treifa, and Rabbi Akiva conceded his opinion. Shimon teaches one cut the gullet, and Rabbi Akiva conceded his opinion. And the Gemara raises a contradiction from a Mishnah at the beginning of the next chapter, 4.2a. These wounds contradict treifa in an animal. I'm going to finish there. So that was the first Amud A. Wish you a very good day, and please God, there'll be peace in Israel very soon.